Hello guys, I'm back. Sorry it's been a few days, just homework and stuff. Before we get started, I do want to ask one question. Looking at my video views, why are different chapters getting like less amount of views than the one after? Like, I don't know, I think it's like chapter 5 has more views than like chapter 4. If not, it's chapter 6. But are we skipping chapters? Who's skipping chapters here? Anyways, it's fine, I guess. You do you. Anyways, let's get into it. Mastermind Rise of Anarchy. Written by Clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Read by Green MHA. Chapter 12. Friendship. Summary. Making connections is useless if you never use them. Fumikage was unhappy, and Dark Shadow didn't like it. It wasn't just because he could constantly feel the unhappiness of their bond, though that was obviously a part of it, but the simple fact was that he just didn't like seeing his best friend like this. Fumikage had been with him for as long as he could remember, and had to put up with his mood swings and having to share his body with another entity. Yet he never resented Dark Shadow for anything. He didn't deserve to be treated with suspicion because of who his mentor was, or even because Dark Shadow had lost control and hurt someone at that nightmare of a training camp. The constant side-eyes were getting exhausting, and the only thing that Hawks had been that bad. If anything, he was fun to have around, and had been helping pull Fumikage out of his edginess by providing some much-needed brightness to his worldview. Of course, that had been completely shut down, and Dark Shadow could feel the way Fumikage's thoughts swirled and eventually shut down as he tried to reconcile the bright chicken nugget that they had interned under with the hardened villain the news talked about. Hawks couldn't have changed that much overnight, right? Dark Shadow curled up in Fumikage's lap and let him stroke his beak, even though he was wrapped around the branch they were sitting on, to make sure that Fumikage didn't fall off. Branches provided enough shadows that they both felt comfortable despite the afternoon sun, and the height, ironically, kept them grounded. Hawks had been right, after all. They were birds, and birds were meant to fly. Climbing the trees also gave Fumikage a lot more privacy than he would have get hanging out in the dorms after school. In the dorms, like in the hallways at school, there were always eyes and whispers and threats of them, at least, that made Dark Shadow want to go crazy. He kinda understood how Mastermind could have fallen into villainy if people refused him to prove himself like they were starting to do to Fumikage. Some days Dark Shadow just wanted to rip out the throat of the person next to them to imply that Fumikage was awful as soon as they thought that they were out of earshot. But even more than to escape Hideaway, the trees felt like home, which is probably why Dark Shadow grew defensively when someone started to climb up, making the leaves rustle as they disturbed the peace and silence, and came into their home uninvited. "Calm down, Dark Shadow," Fumikage ordered quietly. He didn't say anything else, but Dark Shadow could feel the worry across their bond. He was worried that if Dark Shadow growled at an intruder, that it would be one more tally in the villain column, which was absolutely ridiculous. Reluctantly, Dark Shadow settled back in his place on Fumikage's lap, but he refused to relax completely. He would have felt bad about it if Fumikage wasn't tense and ready for a fight too. It wasn't long until a blonde head poked above the leaves. What what did being around 1A get too exhausting? "What are you doing here, Monoma?" Fumikage explained. "I thought you hated our class." "No, I hate 1A as a whole. That doesn't mean I can't sometimes tolerate individual members," Monoma drawled. "And I'm a UA student too, so I'm just as welcome in these trees as you are." "Then find your own tree," Dark Shadow grumbled quietly. "Aw, don't be like that," Monoma pouted. Maybe I should take back my statement if a member of 1A is too selfish to even share his tree. Fine, Dark Shadow. Fumikage was still eyeing Monoma suspiciously. He hadn't made fun of them or treated them like future villains, so maybe having him here wouldn't be terrible. You're welcome to enjoy your inner darkness alongside us if you so choose. Monoma grinned and settled onto one of the branches, closing his eyes to better enjoy the stillness of the afternoon. It was a few more minutes until Dark Shadow and Fumikage were able to relax as well, but the longer their company stayed without offending them, the less intrusive he appeared. Sure, Monoma may have been an uninvited guest, but maybe he wasn't quite as bad as they had been afraid of when they weren't around the rest of the hero students. Dark Shadow lost track of how long they sat there before Monoma broke the silence again. Things have been insane lately. Almost makes you wonder what's right and wrong anymore. Dark Shadow bristled. If you're gonna make a sneer comment about Fumikage, you can leave. Dark Shadow, Tokoyami scolded in frustration, a tinge of fear making their way through his bond. Monoa didn't seem to mind the outburst. However, he just raised his hand in surrender. I was talking about me. Well, everyone really. I think about it. We all are hero. We all were through the Hero Commission, and the Hero Commission was there to protect us. But look how that turned out. The villains are obviously not in the right. I mean, they're killing people, but they destroyed a school just to stop some new bullies. It's confusing, is all I'm saying. I don't know who's right at this point. Maybe no one is. Fumikage offered a moment. Maybe everybody's wrong, and the correct path is to descend and remain hidden from human eyes. Monoma raised an eyebrow. Pessimistic, doesn't it, Edgelord? Fumikage shrugged. More like nihilistic, but perhaps you're right. Perhaps darkness of the current world is simply overshadowing my own inner darkness, is blocking out the light of hope. Hmm, maybe. Mortimer frowned at the thought. It's something to think about at least, but hey, if you ever want to talk more about it, I know a couple kids that are open to have discussions. We might not be able to really make the world sense, but we can at least get some sort of truth from the propaganda been fed into our whole lives. You're always welcome, and who knows, you might even learn something. Dark Shadow could feel Fumikage's pleasant surprise. But then again, maybe it was his own. He hadn't thought that Monoma was capable of being polite, much less willing to discuss philosophy and able to treat Fumikage as an equal instead of a threat, unlike some of his own classmates. Maybe having company wasn't too bad after all. I'll consider it. Fumikage. Having more friends to help negative the darkness that would not be unwelcome. Monoma smiled. I completely agree. Dinner was even more awkward than it usually was, and Mandalay knew it. It was her fault. Ever since she'd found that stupid note, she just hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. She was a hero. She didn't want revenge, but Muscular had taken so much from her. He had wiped out an entire family, and all he got was a prison sentence, when she got a lifetime of pain and guilt that she couldn't save them. She couldn't believe that she was actually considering it, but if anything would have come of her more violent fantasies. Muscular was locked away in Tartarus, where even a hero wouldn't be able to reach him. She flinched as Pixie Bob suddenly slammed her hands down on the table. That's it! I'm so sick of everyone mopping and keeping secrets from each other. We're a team, so just take the bull by the horns and get the hell over with. She glared at each of them, the expression empathizing the puckered scar that ran across her face. Who else received a creepy note last week? And don't you dare lie to me! Mandalay's mouth went dry. Pixie Bob knew about the note. Had she accidentally broadcasted it or something with telepathy? Did the others know it was possible to do to Muscular? Even if it wasn't possible, were they going to abandon her for it? Was this going to be the final straw that kept them from breaking up? Wait, did she say who else? Ragdoll almost sighed in relief. I thought I was the only one. You got one too? Pixie Bob nodded. I'll go grab it. Anyone else need to get theirs? Mandalay nodded numbly and stood and quickly followed Ragdoll, but Tiger shook his head and pulled something out of his pocket. I've got mine right here. Pretty creepy it just showed up like that. How did you know we all got one? Ragdoll asked. Did you leave them? What? Pixie Bob looked genuinely offended. Why would I do something like that? Didn't you notice? Mandalay eyed her suspiciously. Notice what? Pixie Bob stared at them in shock. Are you serious? None of you noticed the letters? Whatever, I'll explain in a minute. It'll be easier to show you anyway. She rushed from the room and Mandalay only hesitated for a moment before running to grab her own note. Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of her thoughts as she unlocked the box under her bed and took out the paper that already looked worn from how many times she'd read it. By the time she got back, Tiger and Ragdoll were waiting for her, their own notes sitting heavily on the table in front of them. Seconds later, Pixie Bob ran back into the room and slammed her note on the table. Some of the letters are in different fonts, but mine don't make any sense. I already sent dust bunnies searching for the rest of the house, and they didn't find anything either. So I figured someone had the rest of the message, and it was probably you all. But then no one said anything, and I almost thought I was going crazy. Mandela grabbed her note and held it up so that the others could read it. 2. Don't you feel, bolded E, like you, bolded Y, O, and U, were robbed, bolded R and D, of, bolded O, the best years, bolded Y, of your life? EYOURBOY, Pixie Bob said out loud. It might say something like you're a boy or something, but why? And what's with the extra E? Tiger cleared his throat awkwardly. I think I might know. I noticed the different font, but just through the note. It was posing purely anonymous, which would make sense if this was a prank or villain trying to get under our skin. He pushed the note forward so that they could see what it says. Don't, bolded D. You want to live in, bolded I, a world where, bolded E, you would be accepted, bolded D. Oh, Tiger. Mandalay grabbed his hand. You know you were accepted, right? We haven't done anything wrong to make you doubt that, have we? No, I know you all accept me, but the world at large is a different story, Tiger sighed. But that's not what's important right now. It spells out died. Hence why I wrote it off as feartastic. But combined with your boy, I think it's referring do you think it's referring to Coda? Mandalay whispered. It would make sense, Pixie Bob said gently. It was a tragedy, and whatever those note writers' goals is referencing Dakota's death. It would be sure to make emotional impact. It's a gut punch, Toga growled. A cheap shot. We found his body in the mountains near here, right? Ragdoll asked. I think the extra E is in Pixie Bob's. Might be a clue to the message. She scooted her chair back so the others could lean in and read her note. Don't you, bolded O, want, bolded W, to take back what, bolded H, was stolen, bolded E, from, bolded R, you? How would you even... Mandalay frowned. All for One is in Tartarus, and it's not like you can just force him to give Search back. No, Ragdoll said shortly, I can't. There was a tense moment before Tiger cleared his throat awkwardly, while adding Pixie Bob's E to the end of your message would spell where. But there's still an extra letter in weird notes, Mandalay. None of them, Mandalay. I didn't even know you all were getting notes, much less that I was supposed to be looking for different letters. Maybe you just didn't notice, Pixie Bob suggested. I mean, the ones in mine were pretty obvious. It's possible you just didn't register them when you were reading the note. Maybe. She read the note so many times she had memorized it. So, if there were a bunch of letters spelling out something, she would have seen them, right? You just need a fresh pair of eyes, Ragdoll offered. Can we see the note? Mandalay hesitated. The others' notes were all good things, getting Ragdoll's stolen quirk back, letting Tiger being accepted for who he was, mourning Pixie Bob's loss of the youth. All of them were anonymous, though provoking, sure. None of them were obviously villainous like hers was. Mandalay. Tiger put a large hand on her shoulder. You know, Coda's flesh and blood. You have a right to feel whatever you're feeling right now. Whatever that note says, we're not going to judge you for it, and we're not going to love you any less. Mandalay only lasted a few seconds before her resolve and crumbled under the kind eyes of her teammates and shoved the note towards them. Fine, here, have it. Go nuts. Don't you want revenge? Bolted G. She stared at the ground as they read, waiting for her perfect image to break. Sure, they'd say she wouldn't judge her. She wouldn't blame them if they did. God knows she was judging herself more harshly than they possibly could. Well, I see why you didn't notice it, Ragdoll said firmly. You only had one letter, which only makes sense with the other notes. What? Mandalay didn't know if she was surprised or that her teammates were ignoring the elephant in the room, or what her note actually had been a part of. You had to mention. Which one? It's the letter G. Does anyone have a piece of paper? One that's not the notes? I mean, here. Tiger pulled out a notebook. I grabbed it while you were off getting your notes. I'll write down what we have. I think Mandalay's message is first and mine is last, correct? Ragdoll nodded. And mine and then this Pixie Bob's in the middle. Pixie's in the middle. Well, if we're looking for answers, that means we're all going to get them then. This gives us is more questions. He tore out a page of the notebook and they crowded around to read the secret message. Go where your boy died. And that is the end of chapter 12. I'm sorry if that was kind of confusing to listen to. I really don't know how to do that bolded thing, but I don't know, maybe there's more bolded stuff. I don't know. I didn't read that far ahead before podficking it. I think I read like 2 chapters after this. But yeah. I hope you guys have a good day. And stuff. I don't really have anything. So, yeah, I'll see you guys in chapter 13. Peace.